The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Well, welcome to Meet the Author. My name is Joe Nash. Today we're going to be talking to Joan Dillon. She is a Colonie resident. She's written this historical novel, historical romance. Well, we'll find out all about that, but it's called The Irish Rebellion. Welcome, Joan. Thanks for coming over.
You're welcome.
Now, Joan, before we started, we were talking a little bit about this book was a long time in the making. So before we start talking about the book specifically and all the genres and everything, just tell everyone a little bit, where you're from, how you've been living in Colonie for 40, 50 years. Just give us a little short.
I'm from Colonie. I've been living here since I'm married, and I was married when I'm 18. And I used to live on Chesbrough Drive in Colonie.
Yeah.
And my son, he wasn't doing good in school. And we had to go before like psychiatrist and test.
Okay.
And they told me that my son was 7, but he come out 10 hearing, and he's deaf. And they said he needs to go to the school for the deaf. And they says, we can't take him away from mother for being too good. But you are.
Yeah.
Like, I would never holler at him. And he would throw food at my husband, and if my husband hollered at him, I'd get angry.
Okay.
So I thought, gee, these men are very smart. They're smarter than me. And they suggested I take Joey up to the school. Well, when he seen all his little friends and they were signing and swimming in the pool, he threw me under the bus and he wanted to go there.
Oh, okay.
So he was there till he was 14, and they said we both adjusted. And he come home and he graduated from Colonie Center.
Oh, okay. So you stayed in Colonie?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
all the time in Colonie.
Right.
I like Colonie. And like I said, he was home, and I had things to do, and I had to take care of my husband. He was sick.
Oh, okay.
He was a disabled veteran, and we were in and out of the VA. So I put that in the cellar.
Oh, okay.
And then when my husband passed away, I said, I'm going to go down and take a look at that.
All right.
And as I read it, I couldn't believe I wrote it.
Okay, so yeah, then why don't we start there? So you wrote the book, you were telling me before we started, you wrote this about 20 years ago. You wrote it on a typewriter, and so you sort of rediscovered it after your son was older and your husband died. So you rediscovered it, and when you first looked at it, something you wrote 20 years ago, what'd you think?
I thought, gee, that sounds interesting. I couldn't believe I wrote it.
Yeah.
But then as I went through it, I could remember, and some of the stuff in there is family related.
Okay.
Like
now,
my mother was so superstitious, and I can remember my older son brought me to the priest.
Okay.
And he says, can you please tell my mom she's not to be superstitious anymore? The priest says, is she Irish? He says, yes, and I can't tell her.
There is some of that in there. So the book concerns an Irish family. 1641 it takes place. The first half of the book is we'll talk about that in a minute. And then they go to the New World, the colonies. What's it, Jamestown, right?
Jamestown.
So why, have you always had an interest in Irish history?
Always.
Okay, and then what made you want to not just have an interest in history, actually write a book?
Because as I read the history, I says, nobody's going to remember this. They did this, they did that, they did that. But if you put real history in with a novel and make it romantic, they'll remember. And the same way I'm writing another book about Ireland.
So you would call this book, I guess, I didn't read the whole thing. I read a lot of it, but not all of it. You would call this, what, historical romance? Is that what you would call it? And I notice in your bibliography here, the books you've used as a source, you have a lot of history books, the Irish Rebellion of 1641, Bermuda in the Three Colors, Virginia in the 17th century. So you did a lot of
Study.
So what made you come up? Well, tell us the premise of the book. It's about a family in Ireland, the 1600s. Tell us how it all gets going here.
Well, the reason I thought of it, my father used to say, we didn't have anything. Dad died, I was 14, and I was out selling newspapers.
Yeah.
And my mother would take in kids and make cookies. And she would always help other kids. So, as I thought the English were trying to get out, Mary is my grandmother.
Oh, okay, the name in the
Not
book.
the name, but the thought.
Oh, okay.
And she would have done that.
Okay.
And she wanted to get her foster children out, and she lost her life for it. But then her son Patrick and Cullen, who was a priest,
These are the characters in the book.
and
okay.
Kathy, they helped their foster brother and sister get out of Ireland at turbulent times.
Okay. Now, I got to say, you must read a lot of history. The book is kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, it's kind of gritty. The way you describe how the people were, how they look, and the sort of dirty, and the sort of kind of violence and everything. Was that all from your research, or were you
Yes,
just,
that's
okay.
how it was.
That's how it
in
was?
those days, yes.
So tell us about, how did you decide, like I say, the first half of the book, they suffer all this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of murders and this and that. What made you decide to have the characters, this family, and their other siblings, go to America?
I don't know, I just decided on it. My cousin says, how did you do that? How did you bring the Scotchman in? What made you think that? I don't know what made me think it.
Okay.
But as I read Irish, it came into me.
Oh, okay. Now, your story has, I guess, I keep saying romance, historical romance. What do you know about this genre? You were telling me before we started you don't really read much fiction. What do you know about this historical fiction genre, or do you know anything about it?
No, I just, my granddaughter is an example. She says, I read that book and I couldn't read it through. I can't read. My grandmother wrote love scenes like that. And she was actually upset.
Oh, okay.
I says, you have to write it the way you think they would act.
I see. Yes, I would say that let's just say some of the violence in here with the rebellion and the colonies, it was a very violent society. Some of the violence and let's just say the word romance is a bit, it's a kind of graphic. It's not a criticism. It is a bit graphic. What do you think? You think that was important to sort of tell it like it is, kind of?
Yes, it's graphic. It's not as bad as today's graphic.
I know, it wasn't that
But
bad.
I don't know why my granddaughter says my grandmother shouldn't write like that.
So when you're writing in this genre, historical romance, to keep the story going and everything, what do you think's more important, the history or the romance?
At my age, I'd say the history, but if I was younger, I'd say the romance.
Okay. Well, how do you? I know you've come to our library many times. For your next book, which we'll talk about later, I noticed you were looking up the other day. We have these big maps here in our reference books of colonial Virginia, and I just read some of the books. You did research. How do you do your research before you come up with a story?
That's one thing my cousin asked me. How did you know the route that they took? Because I looked at old maps, and I
Okay.
followed it where they were. And I brought them through the bogs.
Okay. So I notice in your book, though, from what I read, a lot of historical fiction will put in what's going on, the political, economic, the social events of the day, in the bigger world. You don't really have much of that in here. It's
I will in the next book.
It's basically, well, let's talk about this one. It's basically the story of this group of people, this family. There's not too many references to the outside, what's going on in the world. Is that on purpose, or were you just trying to tell the story of?
There wasn't much going on in the world in them days. It was all Ireland and the colonies. I mean, in the beginning, the colonies, they were just, disappeared.
Yeah.
And there wasn't much going on. There was no,
They were just trying to survive.
just trying to survive. That's it. There wasn't much going on at all.
Well, you had them go to Jamestown. Is that on purpose? I mean, it's a pretty famous colony. Was that on purpose? You picked Jamestown, or did a lot of Irish go to Jamestown? I don't really know that much about the Irish.
Yes, they went to Jamestown, and they were taken, they were spirited away, the Irish. They didn't go on their own. And they were sent there as indentured servants. And it was hard. They grew tobacco, and it was a rough life there. And they couldn't. They were hated because they were Irish Catholic. And England did anything. They owned Jamestown in them former years.
Okay.
And when you went there, you worshipped under the Church of England. If you were a Catholic, you took a chance of being killed.
Okay. So the other part of the book that I found a little interesting, the parts I read, you have a lot to do with, when they're in the colonies, the family, you have a lot to do with the Indians, Native Americans, I should say. What kind of research did you do for that?
Well,
I mean, that's like the second half of the book. The main story is their encounters.
I did a lot of research. I had to find out, like, when an Indian took her, he was a white man. And I says, he was taken by the Indians. And he took her and the way an Indian would.
Yeah.
And her brother came after her with the help of other people, other Indians. And I had a study when they went into this Indian village. I had a study about the Indians an awful lot. And as you read the book, you can tell I did.
Oh, yeah. So you weren't just making it up out of the blue, as they say.
No, but as I read the history, I put it into romance and
So why
violence.
Yeah. Well, why do you think the romance part of your story with the main, what's the main character's name again? Was it
Patrick
Patrick
and John.
and John? Do you think that keeps the story going? Do you think that'll keep people interested, or
Well,
what?
that and the fact that in Jamestown, I did everything like it was in them days. I mean, the part with the birthing chair is actually funny. I mean, how could you talk about a woman having birth in a chair and make it funny? But I did.
But what's a birthing chair? I don't get to that part. What's a birthing chair?
That's the only way you gave birth
Oh, okay.
in Virginia in the 1640s.
Well, it does come through, like I said earlier, the grittiness of life then, and actually the difficulties of. Actually, there's a part when they're on the ship coming over, which was kind of harrowing. I did read that part. What was that like? Or what did you find out about what
I
life?
had to look up how much the ship weighed, and then there was a guy that raped a little girl and she died, and when they found him, they killed him.
That was.
And I had to say what the people, they wouldn't let the children on deck while they were killing this man. And I had to put in the ways they killed him. That's why it's gritty, because I did it like it was.
Right. Like I said, it was a bit on the graphic side, but I guess I would say, considering the times, it was pretty realistic. I would have to say. So, what has been, again, the book is The Irish Rebellion, Joan Dillon. What has been the response, other than, what was it? Not your granddaughter. You said she didn't. But what kind of response have you gotten so far? The people that have read it.
They said it was great, and they wonder where I got such a mind and how I was so smart and why I didn't do it sooner.
Okay, so we have copies of this book in our library. So, and then like I said earlier, I have seen you in the library. You have gotten some books out, and you've done some research here. You tell me, what's your next project? You're staying with this genre, this historical romance, historical
but the
fiction?
next one is going to be about what happens in Virginia. The death rate was very high for children.
Oh, yes.
And the water was bad. The Indians attacked till Governor Berkeley went after the Indians and built palisades.
Okay.
And like, I have one of the Snowden brothers. He had a wife that he had paid tobacco to have her transferred over. And she took off with another guy, so he didn't want nothing to do with any women anymore. But when Governor Berkeley made the Indians bring the captives back, there was a woman on his field where they just threw her, and she was pregnant. And
So you're using these incidents in your...
yeah, I'm using the incidents.
Now, is your next book that you're working on now, does it have some of the same characters, or is it going to be a whole...
Yeah, some of the same.
Some of the same characters, but it takes place all in the New World, in the colonies? All right.
And it's more graphic.
It's more graphic than this one, I see. So what's that one going to be called?
Colleen.
Colleen? Okay. And what else? Oh, wait, I know what I want to ask you. In your research here, when you're writing on history, do you have any favorite authors that you would like to read? No? How about when you read fiction? I know you were telling me before we started you're not much of a fiction reader, but
No.
do you read some or no?
Some, yeah, I can't remember the...
Oh, okay.
the
All right.
Kathleen Woodworth and,
Oh, okay, yes.
you know.
She's a historical...
and Jude Deverax. I
Okay.
read her.
Are they historical? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
really
like...
sure. Okay. Well, it sounds like you're doing a lot of research for your next one, and then what's the premise of the next one? It's just the goings-on of the Virginia colonies, and is there going to be some romance in that one, like in this one?
It's going to be what they did to the Irish,
Okay.
and I'm going to go after them good.
Okay. So, what do you have you had a lifelong interest in Irish history?
Well, not really. And when I always says, gee, I wonder why they don't like us. We seem like a nice bunch of people. And then when I started reading, oh my God, Queen Elizabeth, she could be
Yeah.
a Hitler and she'd win. I mean, she inflicted a governor of Leeds that had a hanging tree.
Yeah.
And he hanged the Irish women who were Catholics. And he tied their hair around the infants and hung them with the mother. I mean, that's cruelty.
Oh yes, definitely.
And when I read it, I want the people to know, and they're not going to know if you just say this, this, this. You got to put it into...
Okay. Well, now that you've started with your writing career here, you've got this group starts in the being oppressed by the English. They come to America. Your next book has some of the same characters.
But then it's why they were after the English.
Okay,
and
so
the English, you know.
Do you have anything scoped out after the next one, or do you have a whole series envisioned?
No,
or
I just
these two.
One at a time.
Okay. Now, I found it amazing when you were telling me before we started, and I mentioned it earlier. You originally wrote this book on a typewriter, but now you're writing again. You're using word processing. So how's that working out? Entering the modern world.
That works out great.
Okay.
Like, if I go through and then I read history on Google Chrome, they tell everything on that.
I know, there's a lot.
When I read the history and I'll say, oh my God, I got to put that in, and I forgot to in the first chapter. So I go back and I put it in.
So what do you think? Is it easier to do
yes.
to do historical research online on the internet than using the old school way of coming into the library and getting the books?
I don't think you can get over into the school library anymore.
Which school is that?
Sony.
Oh, I think people can go in there.
You have to have a special card I got from here.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I mean, it would be a waste of time when you got it all on the internet.
That's true. But you got to know how to find it.
Yeah.
All right.
That's...
All right. And then before we finish, I just want to ask you a little bit about the cover. There'll be a picture on the screen. I'll show you. How did you get this artwork done, or did someone do it, or?
Well, the publisher was really, really nice about it. This is the third thing I refused to before this.
Oh, they give you possibilities,
they
and you
had
choose.
a castle taking the whole page, and I says that's for a king, not an earl.
Yeah.
And then they had them in a cemetery with a lot of crosses, and I says it's just their mother.
Oh, okay.
And they had the women dressed in gowns. But after the third time, I says, I better just leave it. They were in brown. But really, these girls wore cloth shoes.
Okay.
But the way they did it, they did what I asked them to. And they
Okay.
didn't get angry.
And are they the same publishers doing your next book?
I imagine so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, Joan, thanks for coming in. You've given a good, from what I read, I have to do 3 interviews this week with authors, so I only read part of this. Everyone in Colonie seems to be writing a book. So thanks for coming in, and you've given a really sort of realistic and, like I said, gritty and sort of semi-graphic taste of what it was like in the 1600s, both in Ireland and in the colonies, and it probably really was like that, I guess I would say.
Oh, it was. It was.
All right, so that's the Irish Rebellion with Colonie resident Joan Dillon. We have copies in the library if you want to come in and check one out, or people can get them where, on Amazon?
Amazon.com.
Or people can get them on Amazon. So thanks for coming in, and we will see you next time on Meet the Author.